Hello, everybody. Well, hey, gang. Here we are again. Another Saturday. Another long ramble on my part. This time I hope to involve some of you, at least those of you who can type quickly. It's always difficult asking questions of you guys because there's like a 7-8 second delay typically before you hear what I say, and then for people to type it. So it's hard to have a true back and forth, but I want to try. It's nice to try occasionally. I'm going to wait for a few more people to show up before I start on the topic I'd like to discuss. It's my channel, my soapbox, and we'll get to amp questions and all that. But I want to float something for the room, so to speak. Until then, everyone tell me what you've been up to. What's the best thing you've done this week? Aloha, Victor. Everyone tell me, first of all, the best thing that you've been doing this week. Brett, it is a happy psionic Saturday, especially since your amp is 99.999999% done. I've got to go to Home Depot, or actually I got to go to Lowe's and get the little plug for the jack, and I've got to wait till the brown truck arrives so I can make that jumper cable for you. Everything else is done. Scott from Baltimore saw a live band last night. They rocked. I saw a live punk band yesterday. They punked. And the guy was using little Boss Katana 50, and it sounded terrible, just exactly as he wanted. Brett's been out blowing shit up. SVT 4001, spending time with his cat. Okay, Victor, I'll look for that. I didn't see it. I looked for it like that day and the next day, and I've not specifically looked for it since then, but I will. George is building an SLO 50. Very cool. Steve's got a new pedal board going. Got everything from Sweetwater. Hope you throw away the bit of honeys. They always give multiple bit of honeys. And Gooden has not ended up in the hospital due to COVID. I'm sorry that you have COVID. I'm glad that you're not in a terrible condition. It can still change people's lives and not for the best. But I will look for you, Victor, by the way. And Zach from Albuquerque recapped an SVT Classic. That was a proud repair. Very good. That's a lot. Pro tip, I hope you got all the little resistors in the current sensing circuit, the part of the auto bias thing. Those are tricky, and those can often go south. And I just change out the diodes at the same time. Just to be sure, Galactic is recapping a Peavey Pacer 100. And Rob French hacked a power connector fix for a Black Star. No more landfill for that. Speaking of landfill saves, stay tuned. I'm waiting for a different brown truck to arrive so I can bring that Tone Master back from the dead. Zach did all the low voltage current sensing stuff. Good man. Good man. And Joshua Stevens retracted his message. But happy Saturday anyway, Josh. Organized and dusted off the tool drawers. Murph, come over here. Help me do mine. Good Lord. I don't have any dust in them, but I started with the system, and it's just kind of metastasized, and I've got to find the time to redo that. Josh Roberts has got some Kansas City strips for the grill. Sounds good. What's the difference between a Kansas City strip and a New York strip? What is my opinion of the internal buffers inside Catalan bread pedals? I've never tried a Catalan bread pedal, so I don't have any opinion on their buffer. I hope it's great. And I'm sorry that you're feeling bad. They're good, and I hope you get to feeling better. Take all the time you need. Nikki had it. I've not had it. Actually, I think I did have it. I think I had it in February of 2020. 1 month before they told us what things were. At the time, I thought I had the worst flu ever. And there were times I wondered whether I should go to the hospital. It took me about 3 weeks. Nikki had it, but she had been vaccinated, so she had it very mildly. She was visiting her dad's side of the family up in Illinois when she got it from one of her dad's side of the family. And since I did not have it and they had just gotten through it, she just stayed up there an extra week in quarantine up there. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate that. And sent to me, got the Mojo Tone 50 watt 2204. Gonna do the 78 like we talked about. Very nice. All right, we got a lot of people here. I want to talk about something. And it's kind of seemed like I'm going off topic or old man shouting at clouds, but it all does circle back to amps. And the thing comes down to convenience versus quality, and how seductive convenience has been in our lives, particularly in the last 20 years, where we gradually get used to things that are easy. And over time, we don't realize that easy has drifted away from good or maybe even truly desirable. And one of the great regrets of my life, which led me to this whole point, is that I have traveled to some of the most beautiful places, I'd say on earth, at least certainly in Europe. You know, I went to Lisbon, one of the most beautiful places ever. Florence, need I say more? Vienna, Paris, London, Oxford, New York, Chicago. And on all of those trips, I was afraid to bring my old ZVE-10, which was the primary camera for the channel, because something might happen to it. Someone might steal it. I wouldn't have a camera for the channel. And so I just brought my iPhone, or originally my Samsung, and then my iPhone. And I have a whole lot of kind of crappy snapshots from all those trips. You can see what things looked like. And, it took pictures and they're in focus and they're not underexposed or overexposed. Everything is just right there in the middle. And it's designed for everything to be right there in the middle, big wide field of view, everything in focus, everything exposed properly. And you don't have it, the user, don't have any control. You cannot choose to make something expressive, emotional, emotive, or to have significance. You can't say, I want this to be the focus in this foreground or the thing in the background to be the focus of attention. It's just everything all at once. And when everything is all at once, nothing is important. And so I look back on all these photos I have of my trips to all these beautiful places, and there's not a sense of the true beauty of those places. There's not a sense of what I experienced at the time I was standing on that street looking at that doorway, or in that courtyard looking at the orange tree, etc. And if I had brought this, if I had just brought this, I would have had hundreds, thousands of really good photographs that told me what I really wanted to document, that captured what I wanted. I would have control over that. Now, I understand that most people don't want to learn how to use focus and aperture and exposure and all the fun stuff that goes with this. I promise this is going to circle back around to apps. But for those of us who do, it has been seductive to just carry around an iPhone and have something easy. And we all do it. And with all the digital modeling apps and all the HX stomps and tone X's, and even the mighty fractal, and when they're so convenient. You can get all these sounds and millions of sounds, plugins, and all these effects and all these things, but they don't sound or feel like plugging into a good amp. And people argue that, of course. People will argue that iPhones take fine photos, but it is such a seductive thing for the easy. And I see this as being something which is going to get worse and worse, especially with all the AI stuff where you could just push a button and say, make me sound like Van Halen 2. And it will we're getting to the point where it'll kind of do that. But would it inspire you to play a different way? Would you? How much are we going to be able to create new things versus just have boring snapshots of sounds which other people have achieved? And I see that especially with the Tonex downloads out there, where it's like, hey, this is just like this record. It's not really, but that's the premise: is that you're getting this snapshot of what this other thing sounded like, and so you get that sound and you play that thing. But it's really hard to innovate with things like Tonex because they're snapshots of things which have already happened. They're emulated flat, wide angle, everything's in focus, everything's exposed right, snapshots of something which has already happened, as opposed to anything that you'd actually want to revisit and get that emotional reaction to. Now, maybe this is just me, but what do you guys think? Am I just an old man? Though those fucking clouds ask for it, if you ask me. But I mean, like PRT Jazz, 335 or Strat into a Princeton, pedals when you feel like it. That is such a good thing. That is such a sublime experience when you are focused on it and in the moment. Let's see what some people might have said to what I've been talking about. Let's see. Yeah, snappy crap shot. Snappy crap shots. Yeah. Snappy crap shots. That's a fun one to say. Thank you, Audius. I'll keep that in there. Audius Laudus. Yeah, Martin had two Nikon Fs. Yep. Thank you, John William Gould. Yeah, it's the modeling thing. I get frustrated with the Tonex because they're literally just snapshots. They're good snapshots of what any amp was set to. But if you change the treble on that, it's not like changing the treble on the amp would be. It's applying an EQ to the snapshot of an existing amp that was modeled with its treble on, say, 4. The HX stuff, it's easier to be creative because you're actually doing more modeling than capturing. But it's still not. It doesn't sound very good in relation to other real world amplifiers. And another part of this is I think I know for a fact there's an entire generation of people for whom a camera has always been a phone, and they've never tried anything else. And I know there's that same generation, a lot of people will only have come up, maybe they start out with a pod or something, but modeling amps are just how they experience playing in music. And I just don't know if they're going to realize what they're missing out on. It is certainly a lot different playing a model of a Marshall amp through your headphones at 75 dB than it is standing in front of a Marshall and having to keep your right hand and muting technique. Otherwise, you get squeals and weird sounds, which from their perspective might say that that's why the digital stuff is better, because you don't have all that other stuff. SVD switched to a Nikon rig after really poor camera phone results, lugging around 3 or 4 lenses, a speedlight, extra batteries. Well, yeah, I've got a whole bunch of lenses, and I've been training myself to use one when walking around. I've been doing 3-mile walks every day in the late afternoon as the sun begins to come down, usually with Nikki, sometimes by myself, which hopefully will pay off with health benefits as I am sleeping better. But this is a 35 millimeter equivalent, and I've got a 50 mil equivalent coming. And just limiting myself to one lens, one focal length, and small. So I'm not trying to get the world's best anything. I have this, which is a 24 mil equivalent, which is fantastic. And I've got the even larger, more expensive lens that I use for the channel here that I'm not going to be walking around with unless I'm getting paid to take photographs. But something about a very small camera that fits in your hand, and I've got a little wrist strap so I can't drop it, and a small lens, and saying, these are the parameters, these are the limitations. What can I do with this? The same way, if you only have a Telecaster and you only have a deluxe reverb, are you really limited? Because an awful lot of people have changed their particular world with those two things. Yeah. I guess I'll get to answering amp questions, but I wanted to ask some amp questions, or maybe get people to think about stuff like this. I think there's a big problem if we get to the point where everyone is using the same models of the same things that exist, and they're only designed to replicate pre-existing sounds as opposed to doing new things. Now, like I think I've said, the fractal stuff encourages experimentation much more than some of the capture stuff, but I can see it a problem. I can see it being a worse and worse problem. It doesn't matter anyway, because TikTok ain't got no guitar on it. Not TikTok, Spotify. No one's listening to guitar anyway. So that'll all change. It'll swing back around the other way. All musical trends are cyclical. Let's see, find the first amp question. And like I said, Victor, after this, I will go back and find your email. Hey, Colin, I already answered that. It was about the Catalan buffers. Hopefully they're great, but I've not tried them. It's weird trying to have a back and forth with you guys because of the severe delay between when I ask a question, and then when I see your replies. Maybe in a few years, if we keep doing all this together, it'll be faster. Do I have any recommendations on which late 80s, early 90s Peavey amps that are worth buying? Pros, cons of those models. I think the Classic 50 is better built than the Classic 30 in terms of early 90s, because I think it was like 91, 92. There were so many really good late 80s, early 90s Peavey amps, valve and semi-valve and solid state, but I don't recall all the model numbers. I would look for anything that has a 12-inch speaker that has no effects built into it other than maybe a reverb and or a tremolo. As few channels as possible, because simple is always better with such things. And when buying any Peavey amp, I would strongly urge you to only buy those made in Meridian, Mississippi before they moved everything way the hell offshore, because the quality went kaput. And that's not a offshore thing automatically. You can build great things in China or Vietnam or wherever, but they are not. And the stuff that was built down there in Meridian was much, much better. Let's see. I get Josh, bone-in by definition, but yours are boneless. So I guess yours went from Kansas City to New York. Did Amnesia's getting repeated popping from a tube amp, about 16th notes at 60 beat per amp, so 4 per second. That's probably a solder joint or a bad cap. Yeah, the Bandit 112 would be a good one. Brett M, you're cruel to recommend the VTM to people. The VTMs are great if you have a roadie. The VTMs and the Butchers are so damn heavy, but the VTM 120 and 60 are real good amps. That's what Kim Thiel from Soundgarden used. It's basically a 2203, 2204 with some really stupid little dip switches where you can make it sound awful if you want. But back to Dead Amnesia's question, I would go through there with a chopstick and move everything and see if anything is vibrating, and it's got a poor connection, is building up a charge and arcing, building up a charge and arcing, building up a charge and arcing. If that's not the case, you have a bad cap somewhere, most likely. Oh yeah, that'll help an awful lot there with a Trainwreck Express build. The Trainwreck has got so much gain. You can dial it way back and still have tons of distortion, as you've just discovered. Well, Robbie F., I'm glad your wife found a new job. It's a tough time to be between. I can certainly empathize. Bottom Kitchen says maybe it'll be a third category of guitar player, acoustic, electric, and electric digital modeler. So tube versus digital. I hope it doesn't get that far, but I think, there is a distinction in electric and acoustic guitars by and large. But I think, I don't know. I don't want to beat this particular dead horse to death, but I think it's kind of a shame that so much of the modeling stuff is backwards looking when we could get sounds that tube amps could never give us. We could come up with entirely innovative things, and it doesn't seem to be the focus of anyone out there designing this stuff. Maybe it's because they know that guitarists are conservative when it buy stuff that doesn't try to sound like a Fender or Marshall or whatever. But the trouble is they don't sound like a Fender or Marshall or whatever. So, they don't sound like a Fender or Marshall, so sound like whatever. Do something new, and I just don't see that. Sounds like organic versus inorganic. I get into so much. My wife is a lovely, lovely, very intelligent, educated person. But she gets mad at me because I'll go to the grocery store. She says, well, they have the organic. I'm like, they're all organic. Everything here is carbon-based. It's all organic. And I don't really believe that that Kroger's buying anything from any farm that absolutely does not use any pesticides, anything. I think some of the apples aren't waxed and they're marketed as organic for 50 cents a pound more. But organic is such a terrible phrase. I only eat carbon-based foods unless I'm getting a Coca-Cola. Art is a lie that reveals the truth. Pablo got that right. Hey, Steve Nims. Interested in my thoughts on older Soldano amps that are not SLOs. I worked on a little Atomic once. I don't remember much about it. It was an easy repair. Most of the ones that I've had in have been the SLOs and the Hot Rod 50s and stuff. Most people who buy a Soldano tend to go for those flavors. Those are the ones that I've had experience with. For the most part, I worked on a little bitty one though. I think it was an Atomic. It was a nice amp. I just don't remember too much about it other than that Steve does good stuff. So not Steve, Mike. Sorry, Mike. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, Joey. Our collectively human pursuit of discovery can atrophy into just homogenization and, yeah, just it's not something's gonna shake it up. Maybe it'll get to the point where it just goes so far down that path, people just get sick of it and they find an old Peavey Bravo and record an album on their phone probably with it, and that's the sound that none of the plugins get. So yeah, it is like making paintings by doing collage without being aware that collage is even a concept, or that if you're doing it as an artist, it's very different than if you're doing it with unintentional plagiarism or not realizing that there are other ways to make art. What is the best brand of power tubes for 1970 deluxe reverb? I'm glad you asked, because while I would use Electro Harmonics in a 1970, I would certainly never use them in a 1971. I'm shitting you. Of the 6V6s on the market right now, I'm having the best luck with the Electro-Harmonixes. And I get them from Tube Depot. And if you want to get them from Magic Tubes or Eurotubes or the Tube Store, that's fine. Don't order them from Amazon or eBay or Guitar Center or Sweetwater. Buy them from an actual tube vendor because they will actually be set up to test those tubes and they will know their stock. And they will reject the ones that are sent to them that don't pass mustard. I just said pass mustard. Pass muster. Sorry. Yeah, no one wants volume. Everyone wants rock and roll, but no one wants volume. Not really rock and roll, but it's a trade-off, and I understand. We don't want to have people out there going deaf anymore, but there's a better way. There's a better way to do that. Do I have any tips for custom 57 champ upgrades? Hey, Simon, thanks for joining us. Well, I assume by custom you mean a Fender model. The biggest problem with the Fender custom champs and others that they did is that the wiring inside is often not done anywhere near as well as it was done in the 50s. So they're using, I think, Spragues, which are not great caps, so they're certainly $30 each. They're certainly, you're paying for a perceived level of quality you're not really getting. But I would not make any changes to it because it's inherently a valuable amp just to those who like to buy Fender custom shop things. So if the amp doesn't sound great, sell it to someone who will want one. There's a world of better tweed champs out there. I would rather have a Victoria than a Fender. And given how crazy the blues lawyer market is, you could probably sell it and then have enough to go get the Victoria tweed champ and maybe a Strat too. So yeah, but we can't give tube amps to everyone, you know. I thought it was. Let's see if I can pop this up here. Let's see. Let me get something ready for you guys. I thought it was funny seeing that punk band yesterday with the Katana, because the Katana, on the one hand, is unpunk. At the same time, it's a cheap little solid state thing. So at the so on the in that way, it is very punk. It's funny. I guess maybe if it were 10 years older, I would view it as more punk. Let's see, where is that picture so I can pop it up here. Just a second. Here it is. All right. I'm going to do a desk share kind of thing. Let's see here. Which button? Yes, we want to allow that. Thank you very much. All right. All right, so we want to go to preview. So here we are. You guys seeing that? Yes, okay. Let me take Rob's off for this and move this more towards the middle. So, I was just walking down the street. The sun was about to go down. The punk band was set up, and they had the little Boss Katana 50 there. I don't know if you can see the mouse. And I thought it was really funny. It's a punk band, and they're all dressed punk appropriately, and he's got his Strat slung down like Billy Joe Armstrong, and he's got his little Boss Katana there. And on top of it, at first I was like, why is he carrying aspirin to a gig? I realized it's a full bottle of little foam earplugs. I don't know whether they're for him or for the entire band or whether he passes them out to people out there in the crowd. I just thought it was kind of cool in a weird way. And it would never have occurred to me when I was a kid to have a bottle of foam earplugs. I guess that's what those are. And, his phone's right there on the pavement, nice and out of the way. Anyway, so that was the photo from last night. walk. They didn't sound very good, but they were really enjoying themselves. Hopefully that you guys saw that. It's weird sometimes not being able to see what you guys see or seeing in, aspects of it. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Okay. Let's see. Because I didn't see anyone say anything about that or say, yes, we saw it. So I thought maybe after that weird thing a couple weeks ago where everything went south when I clicked the wrong button, I thought, oh, hopefully changing that picture didn't mess up the whole entire stream. Let's see. R says, my 70 deluxe reverb has a GZ34. Would it be better with the 5U4GB? You can use either tube in a deluxe reverb. You can use a 5U4GB in a 66 deluxe reverb. You can use a GZ34 in a 78. They're interchangeable. You often need to rebias when you swap them. Other than that, one of the reasons they went to the 5AR4, which is one of the reasons one of the reasons they went to the 5U4GB, which is one of the reasons I recommend it to a lot of people who own the 60s version, is the wall voltage went up in the late 60s. Most places. It had been at 110, 114, and then it was 117 and 120. And rather than change the power transformer in the deluxe reverb, they just changed the rectifier tube, so the B plus stayed where the 6v6s would be happy. So if you were to put a GZ34 in your 70 and it's biased properly, everything's gonna be fine, but you're gonna have a much higher B plus than it was designed to have, and it can be a little harder on the screens of your 6v6s. So unless you're going to be using a brown box and always giving it 114 volts, I often recommend to my clients who own, say, a 65 deluxe reverb, let's put a 5U4GB in there so your B plus will stay back at 1964, 1965 levels. Hopefully that makes sense, but you're fine either way. Now, where did that go? All right. Hey, I'm popping this up here, Simon. I'm glad you're here. I know this is your first time. I know you put it up here the second time just to put the question marks on there, and I saw it the first time without. But the question marks are very much appreciated. It really helps me see them. I just want anyone else who might be new to the chat who's joining us to please only ask any one question the one time, unless you see me skip it because it didn't have a question mark in front of it. I answer them in the order that they come in. The AI thing with Beato and Rhett Schull that I saw a couple weeks ago that really freaks me out is that YouTube is recreating their shorts with AI visuals, and it's really creepy without their consent. And I can't speak for all channels, but I think I can speak for Rick and for Rhett on this. When we make our videos, we're choosing how we want to communicate our brands to you guys. We're making creative decisions with lighting and color and camera angles and all these things. And then for some company to come in and change all that with AI without our consent, that is really not cool. And I don't have any ability to change that. But I think the Rick Beatos of this YouTube world have some influence, and I like to see he be a 400-pound gorilla in that regard. I imagine some conversations have happened behind the scenes, but when Rhett brought that up brought that to everyone's attention a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh shit, man. What is the point of being creative if a computer is going to second guess our intent? Hey, Dandy. AB 165 basement question. When you do the AA864 negative feedback conversion, what value caps are I'm installing to the right of the 22K resistor, assembly of the 10, the 0.01, and or install 500 picofarad or 1,000? I install a 1 nanofarad, which is the same thing as 1,000 picofarad. If you convert it properly to the full AA864, and you flip the black and green wires on the speaker terminal as part of that, so that the green is going to the tip and the black is going to the sleeve, which is reverse of how the AB165 comes from the factory. Then you want to go to the actual AA864. However, some of the AA864s had a 500 picofarad input cap, and so I go to the 1,000 picofarad, 1 nanofarad, because if you have a baseband with a 500 picofarad input cap, it's a very high impedance node, and that very low capacitance right there can cause humming. And so by doubling that to 1 nanofarad, it reduces, it takes out the hum, makes it a much more stable stage with that high impedance input. Does not change the frequency response in any way that's negative or appreciable. It just takes out a source of hum. And if you were to keep the 10 nanofarad, it would also not have hum, but 10 nanofarad is such a huge value there as far as the high pass frequency goes that you could have a very flubby response. So 500 would be the most proper, but like the original AA864s that had 500, you can, pardon me, you can actually have a noisy stage, whereas the 1,000 picofarad is the way to go. Hey, Joe, thinking about buying a JCM 800. What's the last year that they were still good? Well, if you mean a 2203 or 2204, they were still good through the late 80s, but they were better before 83. The vertical input are better than the horizontal input for two reasons. The vertical inputs, the pots are not mounted. The board is not suspended from the pots and jacks, and so the solder joints don't wear out. Whereas when we went to the horizontal input stuff, the entire board is suspended by the pots and jacks, which means those solder joints often get stressed. You have to reflow them. That's the only reason. And the other reason, aside from the electromechanical support, is that in the post-83 version of the 2203, 2204, they removed one filtering stage, which to me makes the amp sound a little too buzzy and raspy in comparison. And that can be changed, but I still prefer, I much prefer to have the pre-83 version. If you're talking about a split channel reverb, they were never good. So. Yeah, Andre, I see your point. Yeah, but you think that is the MBA approach that Fender's taking as to, everyone in America has a toaster. We need to get out of the toaster business. But they could offer new things. Here's a new sound that sounds fantastic that will last 50 years as well. Or, hey, we're still making that old model, so if your grandfather has one and your dad has one, you can have one too. Rolex still sells an awful lot of watches going with the quality model, even though the old Rolexes that are out there still work too. So I think a lot of our industry has been really damaged by MBAs who are looking at very short-term profit motives. I say that as a poor person. I'm obviously not a hedge fund kind of guy, and I'm kind of proud of that, because it would be a waste of one's time on this planet to think about such awful things. It'd be nice to have the money that comes with it, though, to travel and stuff. But I think if you spend all that time learning about hedge funds and all that kind of chicanery. You probably lose your interest in art and travel and music and stuff. You're just all about the green. Hey, Cremo Mighty. From a quality longevity maintenance point of view, Fender Princeton 64 hand-wired or build Princeton tube doctor kit for about half the investment. Uh, I would build the kit easily because the Fender Princeton 64 hand-wired is terrible, at least for the price. For the price, it ought to paint your house. It's a terrible amp in comparison. I would rather have a well-built kit amp. Given your name and the fact you said tube amp doctor kit, if I assume you're in Europe, in which case the tube amp doctor kit would be a good choice. If you're in the States, I think the Mojo Tone kit is the better way to go. But the Princeton and Deluxe Reverb 64 custom handwireds are just offensive things to exist. They are bad quality masquerading as high quality, which is somehow worse than average quality, being presented as itself. I have not looked at Amplified Nation stuff, Michael. I've heard good things about them, but I have not. I have not had one in or played one. Fly Spaghetti says, I like organic bell peppers only. They're a bit better, but nothing is wrong with normal bell peppers. Well, here's the thing about bell peppers, man. You can buy bell peppers. You can buy the same bell pepper with that's not been waxed for a little bit more. They call it organic. Or you can just grow some bell peppers, and then you know they're organic. Or you can dump all kinds of insecticide on them if you want to. But, there are certain vegetables and certain times of year I like this morning. I went and walked down to the local farmers market, took a bunch of pictures I haven't uploaded yet. But this time of year, if you need tomatoes or squash or bell peppers or okra or anything like that, there's no need to go to the grocery store, and you can get real organic stuff, not organic certified extra expensive stuff. We used to have a place called Easy Way here, and it's just the local farms would sell directly to them, and they'd just pop them in their stall. It was all organic before organic was a brand or a concept that people charge extra for. It was just local produce, and it cost the same as at the grocery store. Of course, that's all gone now. Hey, Tobias, how complicated is it to manufacture amplifier tubes? Why aren't there more factories out there still producing it? Well, it's extremely complicated. It requires technologies and tools that most people don't have anymore. And it's really terrible for the environment. It is really bad. It is really dangerous stuff. And there's a reason that stuff is pretty much just being made in Russia, Slovakia, and China. If you were to build it here and enough environmental safeguards were put in place to make it doable, the end cost would just be, might as well make it of unobtainium. But we know how to do it, but it's not something that any other industry uses anymore, really. So it's not economically viable for a new company to set up shop to do that with today's environmental standards. And that's good. We don't need to have mercury in the water anymore. It's really not good to have flipper babies. I'm not some anti-green person, and I hope that everyone in China and Russia and Slovakia have no health problems as a result of our need for vacuum tubes. But it's not something that you can do in Canada or United States or the EU or Great Britain. Hey, Colin, I have not seen any revs yet. If I get one in, it'll be on the channel, I promise you. Yeah, I think. Well, there are guys I know who play in bands who use digital modelers, but I was talking to the guy who owns that Deluxe Tone Master. He's a real good guitarist. He uses it for this one gig, and he's always just playing clean, and it's just easy. It's lightweight, and he just plays clean. And when I fix it, I'm having him come over here. We're gonna play it next to a real deluxe. I'm gonna go ahead and say it, a real deluxe reverb, and see if my opinion from 4 years ago playing it at the Guitar Center, recorded on my iPhone, holds up. The one I played before, you hit it hard and it just falls in on itself, and it's like there's the world's worst Dynacomp built into it. I think it's how they limit the output, so it's a 22 watt amp. I don't go to Aldi for two reasons. First of all, you need a quarter to get a grocery cart. I never have quarters anymore. I don't have change. Second of all, a lot of the brands that they carry, I don't know, and I have tried a few things from there, and I thought the flavors of everything were off, not good. So I mean, there are things which like when you buy dairy, certain brands taste better than others. And when all that goes out the window, it's really hard to know if it's worth getting. But mainly because I'm not going to have a quarter. I can't get a cart, so I can't call somebody who cares. Hey, R, swapping the phase inverter cap from 10 nanofarad to 1 nanofarad in your 70 deluxe reverb. What type and brand should I use? Get a Vishay 562R 1 nanofarad, 1 kilovolt from Mauser. The trouble is it's a $1.50 cap, and their minimum shipping is $7.99. So get a few more components while you're at it. Unless you live in Texas, that's your best bet. Or just whoever sells components in your neck of the woods, get any 1 nanofarad. If they have a 1 nanofarad film cap, it'll be fine for just one cap. It's nothing worse than spending $10 to get one capacitor. But look up my videos called "Boring and Even More Boring," and it shows how to navigate Mauser and order parts. Probably something else there that you need to justify the $9 shipping, because it doesn't matter if you get something 20 pounds worth of stuff or half an ounce worth of stuff. Sounds like a drug deal now. It's $8.99 or $7.99 for the shipping, whether it's FedEx or UPS. Mauser's great on the shipping, but it's always that minimum. So you don't want to order one thing from them. That's assuming you're in North America, of course. Hey, David Ross. Recently bought a 65 Deluxe Reverb issue with a Weber Ferromax. Any thoughts on the speaker? The owner also sent the original Jensen C12K. I have two thoughts. First of all, the Jensen C12K is one of the worst sounding speakers in the world for deluxe reverb. So, of course, modern Fender being modern Fender, that's what they stuck in the app. It's a terrible speaker. Put it to the side. It's heavy enough to keep a door open if necessary. Or if you like to go fishing, it'll work as an anchor in a pinch. The Ferromax series is great. It's a whole series of Weber offers, so I don't know which one you have, but almost any Weber 12-inch speaker in a deluxe reverb is certainly going to be better than a C12K. Sorry. No, it's a change in the weather, Victor. It dropped 25 degrees last night, and the fronts come in, and so my congestion is up. So I think the Ferromax is a great way to be. The Ferromax, I think, is their older branding, and it's probably a 12F125 or 12F150 series, which are great speakers for a deluxe reverb. I know Aldi is a German company. I just don't like their grocery store. I don't like Kroger either. And I really was underwhelmed with Trader Joe's when they first came here, and I went there expecting it to be great. And oh my God, most of their food is so bad. Let's see. Yeah, I'm aware of all that stuff, but they pay me a pittance. So, I'm making them a lot more money than they're giving to me. I know that. Even at my modest scale, I know that this is an upside down relationship, but they're the only, I can't compete with YouTube. I can't set my own server and maintain this kind of stuff on my own because, they have the ability to do this. It's cost me a lot more to lose money doing it on my own. Even I think the Beatos of this world would lose money trying to do this themselves. So it's one of those things. Best 6L6 tubes on the market. I like the kind of tubular, shiny ones. Sorry. I gotta say stuff like that once in a while. I really like the tongue saw 6L6 GC STRs, the short plate ones. I like them a lot. From a good vendor. Hey man, thank you very much. Love the grounding mods on the 2204 vids. For my kit build in a nutshell, what's the most efficient sequence to follow during the process? Thanks. Well, I'm going to go over those same things in the next video on this super bass, but call me. We've been threatening to get in touch with each other on the phone, and our work schedules have not dovetailed on any one day. But that's easier to talk about because you can ask the question, I can answer it, then they'll lead you to another question. If I go down that rabbit hole right now, without being able to be more specific, it's a bit tricky. I've already covered very much specifically in the 2204s, but I think you have a different question than the one that I'm taking away from these words that you've typed right now. So let's iron that out maybe this afternoon. Is that cool? I appreciate the super chat very much. I'm not refusing to answer a super chat, but he has my phone number. He lives in town, so we can work through that. What are the ingredients for maximizing the best tone out of a 1x12 cab? Dimension, weight, materials, speakers. Well, Colin, it's really tricky because there's a little bit of a crapshoot with acoustic design. You can do a whole bunch of math and say this should sound fantastic. And it may sound like nothing special, may be fantastic, may be awful. But the trouble is it may be fantastic despite the factors that you had control of. Because, if you're designing something to be used for PA use or studio use, to be flat frequency response, then you're going to go into things like, okay, well, we're going to do Baltic birch with this density, and it's going to have this kind of surface treatment on the inside, and this kind of dampening batten material, and this kind of vent to control the ports. You can do all that, and you can get something that works, and you can say, these are the parameters. We're going to build 16 prototypes with slight variations and find the one that gives us the sound we're after. When we're talking about a guitar amp, all that goes out the window. And you can have the world's best sounding guitar amp built of the world's worst materials in terms of the cabinet and all that. So pine, like an old Fender is built out of. Well, some pine sounds great, some pine sounds terrible. It depends on how it's aged and how it's dried. And there are only rough guidelines, like more volume usually gives a bigger sound with more low end. But if you take it too far, then the speaker is just floating in space, at which point it's no longer taking advantage of the baffle to project. Because if it was too big, the speaker would just sound like it would kind of on your bench, which is nothing. If you ever heard a speaker that's not attached to a baffle in a cab, it's a terrible sound. You can also have a really great sounding amp that sounds terrible in one particular room. Your existing cab may sound fantastic in a different room. So it's really tricky. Generally, for a 1x12, I would want it to be, maybe 11 to 14 inches deep. At least I would want it to be at least 18 inches by 18 inches in the other dimensions. I'd prefer it to be like 24 or greater in the other two dimensions. Get some interior volume. I'd want it to be made of either a very strong, acoustically neutral wood like a Baltic birch, or a resonant, very nice, dry piece of, or several pieces of pine, knowing that it may backfire and may sound terrible in certain rooms if it couples to the floor, in which case you get a milk crate or put it on a plastic or a folding chair, which is what people do all the time. So you can have all these designs, and then the amp sounds better on a milk crate, and you're like, well, so much for math. But that's just the nature of guitar cabs. What profit a man if it gains the world and loses his soul? Yeah, Martin. That's why we come here. That's why we do these Saturday chats. We get into the Pablo Picasso quotes and the philosophy. And I think that I say that half kidding and I'm half quite serious. And then I see people talking about green eggs, and I'll be the ham. So everything from Pablo Picasso to Dr. Seuss. I think that's a good place to be. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. Fried okra, DB says, I cannot stand this stuff. Other people in my family love it, and I know that as a Southerner, I should promote it. I like okra and gumbo. In fact, I only like gumbo that has okra. Otherwise, it's not gumbo. Since gumbo comes from an African dialect for okra, but I don't like it when it's fried. Then it's crunchy on the outside and hairy and slimy on the inside. A lot of people like it just as an excuse to eat ranch dressing. Hey, good morning, Bradster. Are there any alternatives to the tubes themselves? Yeah, there are solid-state amps which sound pretty good for certain things, and there are digital modeling amps which are good for certain things, but nothing quite sounds like a tube yet. And I know that at some point they're not going to be available anymore, and I hope that before that point someone comes up with something that plugs into a 12x7 socket and acts like a 12x7. Electronically takes the place of a 12x7. Maybe has a little dip switch and say 12AT, 12AY, 12AX. That'd be my dream. A little thing that just models the behavior of a tube very, very well, that fits into an existing Noble socket, that runs off the existing power. I hope that someone is working on that, because I think they've got about 15 to 20 years to get that right. That would keep all these things going a lot longer. But in 15 years, I'll be 70. I'll be 70, and so if that doesn't happen, I'll just sit around and eat my mush. Anyway, speaking of such things, we're at the top of the first hour. I'm going to take a 7-minute intermission, and we will come back and resume the fun, or we'll start the fun. I guess that's a better way. The fun will begin in 7-ish minutes. Thanks for being here. This bloke's doing whatever the hell he wants with his own 7-minute break, Brad. At least my 7-minute breaks are intentional, not because I've frozen. Let's see. Any tips for a beginner wanting to get into amp building? Particularly interested in Marshall Circuit's basic soldering skills, and recently recapped my 1986 2203 successfully. Hey, Alan, thanks for joining us. Well, I'm going to call up a link that I use so much on these chats that I have made a graphic for it. valvewizard.co.uk. You need to go to that site, read every chapter that he's got up there, read every example, all of the stuff, and then buy a kit and put it together and see how you do. And for kits, if you're in the United States, I'd recommend Mojo Tone. Let's see. Hey, Eric. Got a Milkman half pint. Cool. Put a 12 AT in the preamp slot. It's a lot cleaner. The volume is controllable. Is it safe? Yeah, it's totally safe. I would say that an AT, though, is not the correct choice for the best possible sound. An AT, like an AU, is a current amplifier tube, whereas a 12AX7, an AX, is a voltage amplifying tube. So I would suggest that if you want a similar sound to what you have with the AT, but you want similar levels of gain, try a 12AY7 rather than an AT, because an AY is a lower gain voltage amplifier as opposed to a lower gain current amplifier. Now, you may prefer the sound of the 12AT, and it is totally safe, but given how ATs work with current versus AYs work with voltage, you probably would have, on paper at least, I would expect the best results with a 12AY. But what you've done will do no harm whatsoever. Yeah, and before all the fluorescent lights released their mercury, they buzzed and flickered and caused me mental stress and anguish. Hey, Jack. Many other YouTube amp guitar guys often speak about driving your preamp section of your amp to get a different sound. Double talk as if it cannot be heard as a separate thing. It's a complicated subject. Certain amps, the power section will respond very differently if the level coming out of the preamp is high. And other amps, the power section isn't really fussed about what level is coming out of the preamp too much. The power section is going to stay clean. So in an amp like a 2203, 2204, that's kind of on the verge of where the output section is going to stay relatively clean and all the gains coming from the preamp, so you don't have to have absolute level coming out of the preamp because there's a lot of distortion characteristics in the preamp itself, and the output stays relatively clean. With modern high gain amps, whether that's like a Bogner Uberstahl or a Friedman BE100 or etc., there's so much gain in the preamp, and the output section is designed to be so clean that it doesn't really matter too much what the level coming out of your preamp is. Now, level is different than gain. It can be real high gain and saturated and all, but you don't have to slam the input of the phase inverter to really drive the output section to get the sound that you want. Whereas if you have an older Marshall or a Vox or a Fender, where the preamp is relatively clean, when the amp does begin to overdrive and distort, a lot of that is coming from the phase inverter and the output section, as well as the preamp. It's all those things working together. And so you will have a very different response and feel from the amp if say your volume's on 6 rather than 4 or 3, and that's different from overdrive. You could do that with a super reverb. A super reverb on 3 feels completely different than a super reverb on 6. Even if the super reverb on 6 is still clean, it feels differently. The response is different. And so you have to know how the entire amp works. Now, that does not mean that you have to go take classes in this or understand electronics. You have to have tried every possible combination of things with your amp and say, oh, I don't know why, but that's what sounds good to me. I like the deluxe reverb at 3.5, and I like the super reverb at 5 or at 2. It's up to you. But my Marshall, my 2204, a lot of guys will keep the channel volume at like 2 o'clock and the master at 10 o'clock, and they're happy. Whereas if you're to do the same thing with a 50-watt plexi, the amp sounds kind of anemic with those settings because the output section is not doing anything there. So, aside from it sounding bad or being too loud for you to be in the room with it, there's very little you can do with the front controls on an amp that will damage the amp. So play around with it. Try all kinds of combinations. See what sounds please you. Hey, Alan, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Stereo rig, splitting before delay and reverb, left from Fender amp, right through FX loop of DSL 20. The DSL gets loud and wet. Help. All right, let's see. Trying to think of what you're asking here. You're splitting before the delay and reverb. If you're splitting before the delay and reverb, how are you getting different signals? Are you trying to just run all your... I don't understand how you have left and right. Can you give me an update on below in real time so I can better understand? So you're splitting before the delay and reverb, but that would tell me that you only have delay and reverb on one amp, so I don't understand how you're getting the results you're saying. So can you clarify? I'll be glad to answer your question. I just don't think I understand it as asked. And if English is not your first language, I understand, we all understand. Take your time. This is a low stressful place to be. Left going in front of the Fender amp. Okay. Left out of the delay and reverb, or are you splitting left right and then all the wet stuff's going to the effects loop of the DSL? So all this delay and reverb are just on the DSL? And is your issue that the DSL has the dry in it, and not just the wet in it? Is that what you're saying? You want both going to both amps. Okay, well, that's fine. Split after. You don't even need to split. Just go into your delay, your DD500, and from the out, so go mono into your delay, go stereo out of your delay into the stereo of the Big Sky, and then go Big Sky stereo out to both amps at the same time, and you will have delay and reverb in both amps. And why don't you run into the input of the DSL 20? Otherwise, you're going to have no preamp on the DSL 20. Be better if you're to just go guitar, any overdrive pedals you have, then into the delay pedal. You want the delay and reverb in the loop. Well, then, your Fender amp doesn't have a loop. So you need to... Are you using the DSL 20 as a dirty amp and you're A-Bing? which case you would only want to have the delay and reverb in the loop of the DSL. Hey Jeff, and not have them in connected to the Fender at all. I think this might be all right. Front of DSL goes to FX into delay effects return from Big Sky. Okay, well I just for the Marshall. Okay, so you're splitting to the Fender and you're splitting to the Marshall, but the Marshall's the one that only has the effects. I don't know what you mean by loud and wet unless you have the delay and reverb set. If they're set to 100% wet, then you're gonna. There are two things that are possible. You may have. I don't know if the effects loop of the DSL-20 might be a parallel loop instead of series, in which case you will have the dry get louder when the loop is on, and it will be potentially phasey. Or it could be the level settings of the of your effects pedals, because you may have it set to be too hot an output. I would have the series FX loop. I'm not sure what the problem is there. I don't know that I can help you from here. I would first of all, though, I would say, all right. Forget about the Fender. Plug straight into the Marshall, and from the Marshall, go out to just the reverb pedal. And get the reverb in your effects loop and dial that in until you turn the reverb on and off and the sound doesn't change, except for one has reverb, one doesn't. And then do the same with the delay. And once you're sure that the reverb is working in your effects loop and the delay is working in your effects loop, then you can have both. But it's tricky, but I don't have your rig. I don't know the DD500, and I don't. This is probably something that in person we could work out very easily. I don't know that I can help you remotely from here. I'm sorry. I apologize. There are things I can do from here, and there are things I can't, and I don't know that there's a trick unless there's a level. I don't know if the DSL-20 has an effects level setting, whether it has like -10, +4, -30. I know that at least the Big Sky can be set to different levels, and that may be the issue, that the DSL is putting out -10 and the Big Sky is returning +4. So I would contact Strymon, because they'll be able to help you with this. Also remember that it's okay to turn the mix down towards the dry until you get the levels where you want. But if the level is just louder when the pedal's on, it's probably a level mistake in the pedal. Isolate it down to whether it's the reverb pedal or the delay pedal causing the issue. It's probably only going to be one of them. But either one of them can be calibrated or set up for different levels. Real fast before we get off onto other subjects. In the guitar world, there are 3 levels that you're likely to encounter. There's what's called instrument level, which is nominally -30 dB. There's what's called line level, which is nominally -10 dB. And if you're feeding it -30 and the pedal's giving you back -10, you're going to have a big boost from using that pedal, and see if that pedal's got a -30 level. There's also +4, but that usually only applies to balanced gear, and we don't have much balanced gear when it comes to effects loops and pedals like that. So usually we're only going to be dealing with instrument or line, so -30 or -10. But it's important to have all those things set to the same level, or you can turn on a reverb pedal and everything gets louder, like you might be running into. I have not seen the new hand-wired AC30s, Jonathan. I get asked this every chat. Someone needs to send me one so I can say yes, but I have not seen one of the new ones. The old ones were not very good, but they certainly cost a lot. It's not that they were not very good; it's that they were not better, and in some ways were worse than the standard non-hand-wired Vox AC30s. So, any suggestions, preferences on thickness of speaker baffles? Besides the overall weight and issues of using solid pine versus plywood. Well, plywood's a lot better for a baffle in general. It's denser, it's stronger, and it's acoustically more neutral. And 5/8 to 3/4 inch is the usual range that you would use. Old Fenders used particle board, but I would use plywood, and I like plywood much better for a baffle. I don't like a pine baffle. Yeah, real eggs are a thing of beauty. It was one of the great sad discoveries of my life is that when you go to Europe and the UK, the eggs are just so much better than what you get here, even in restaurants. But they don't in the UK. They don't know what to do with them. So you have this beautiful egg with no seasoning whatsoever. I can get good eggs here. I could have bought some down at the farmer's market today, except I walked and didn't feel like carrying eggs. But you can get good eggs here, just not typically at the grocery store. Those pale little yellow things that we all grew up with are so bad, and the deep, rich orange yolk tastes so much better. Let's see here. Yeah, I need to come up with a graphic for use these tubes. No, I've not had a rev-in. No, I don't have any opinion on this. But I also don't want to be like, oh, that question, push the button, there's that response, and come across like I'm being snide or anything. Just because I have the misfortune of having to be here for every live stream doesn't mean that other people are doomed for that. So they may not know that I've already answered that a million times. And so I don't want to make people feel bad for asking a question, because then they might not feel free to ask a question that no one's ever asked before, So it's a tricky thing. I don't like wrench, and I don't like Varellin devices for the reasons that Brad already stated during the last stream. Brussels sprouts are incredibly tasty, as I saw other people were already saying during the last break. Brussels sprouts, however, most people, in America at least, have never had them served in any way that you would want them to be served, because people in America tend to steam or boil them, which is one of the worst ways to make any cabbage variant taste. It just brings out all the armpit and piss smell. But if you roast Brussels sprouts, and you roast them very, very hot, so the outside crisps up and the inside turns creamy, they're fantastic. Roasted Brussels sprouts are a phenomenal thing, but most people grew up being forced to eat boiled Brussels sprouts, which are just of the devil. Most people in America have never had good broccoli either. It's sad. Or lima beans. Lima beans are fantastic when you don't cook them to mush. Hey, Fly Spaghetti, please take the Marshall valve state amp seriously. Okay, let me know what I can read so I can understand that particular amp, so I can get ideas for mod. Just a second. Hold on, I'm working on this. I'm coming back. I did a dumb thing. I had the camera connected to the giant battery. And I turned on the camera, but I forgot to turn on the battery. So mine didn't overheat, Brad. Mine wasn't a failing of the camera. Mine was a forgetting to push one button. An hour and 26 minutes ago, and I turned this all on 30 minutes before the stream. So this thing takes exactly just under 1 hour of HDMI use for the battery to drain. Whereas if I had remembered to push the button, so I'd be running off the big battery, it would be going just fine. Last week, I remembered to push the button and did the entire stream off battery. So here we are. I just plugged it into USB. So, oh, you had silly. I can turn on the silly setting, and mine will not overheat. Mine never overheats. Sorry. Anyway, question was, what can Flying Spaghetti read so we can understand the particular amp so we can get ideas for a mod? Yes, a valve state mod. Why not? I would suggest not worrying about modding a valve state, but in terms of understanding how it works, go take electronics courses. It's all full of transistors, and transistors work the way transistors work. And the real answer to that is a semester's, at least a chapter or two of a college course. I can't do that here. But until you have done all that work, don't make any mods. There's nothing you could do that would not be a problem. Mine is bigger than Brad's. I love his A6700. It's one of the best photography cameras on the market, and it is great for video, but it can overheat if you don't have the third-party fan, whereas mine is less good for photography, better for video, and does not ever overheat. But if you don't remember to plug it in either to USB power or forget to turn on your big external battery, it can only do about just under an hour of live streaming, I just found out, which is actually pretty damn good. Which is the same as the 6700 would do a live streaming at 1080 just off battery, because they have the same battery and the same sensor. Let's see. As far as the tube replacement thing, I wouldn't look to a company like Verellen. I would expect the solution will come to us from a company like Sony, or I guess Yamaha would be the analog for that. Yamaha or Roland, a large company that has the R&D capabilities. Not the new tube thing, but something which has that premise, but actually is a plug-in replacement. Hopefully we'll get there. Hey, Steve. Steve's been in the market for the 335 guitar. Thanks for that. Heritage H535 price has been reduced from $3,000 to $2,000 on Sweetwater. On thoughts on Heritage? Well, that's a huge price drop, but Heritage makes great guitars. Heritage are the employees in Kalamazoo, Michigan, who did not want to go out of business when Gibson moved to Nashville, so they bought the tools and bought the building. They got some of the tools. Some of the tools went to Nashville, but they are built much the same way they were built back before Gibson left Kalamazoo. I think they have an unfortunate headstock, but that's me. But they're really good guitars. And Wes agrees on the headstock, which is just a shame. But, you know, headstock design is a tough thing. especially with a very traditional looking guitar. Hey, Plum Bum. I am doing okay. Not quite awesome, but I'm doing okay. I recently looked at my SG's electronics and noticed it's wired like a Strat, albeit with 500K pots. Does this affect the sound or response in any major way? What do you mean it's wired like a Strat? How do you, well, in terms, give me some more information on that, because I can't imagine that you could make a wire it. I mean, you have a 5-way selector switch or what? Tell me more. Give me more information. I can tell you if it affects the sound. I mean, everything affects everything, but I'm not sure what you mean by that. You just mean the sequence of cap to tone pot or something? Let's see. Our Pastora's got a whole bunch of questions here. In place, stressing the SC12X7. Okay. Good. If you want to try a 5R4, might build a variant with 6L6s. Okay. Data sheets are your friend when it's coming up to reservoir cap limits with different rectifier tubes and all that. I can't get into OT primaries. I see you there on your SG. I'll be right with you. Wait a second. Well, that's Murph Vienna talking about the SG versus Strat wiring. I don't know what Plum Bum music means though. I don't know that I can help you, Pastor. That's a lot of numbers you're throwing at me, and my brain shits the bed when I see too many numbers in front of it at once. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark. I did not hit Lisa. I did not. It's hard to do Tommy versus Arnold. It's very similar. Only Arnold's a better actor. Hey, James. Attenuates his deluxe reverb about 18 to 20 dB with a Tone King Ironman at home. That's a huge attenuation. Am I missing out on mid-range frequencies developing because the speaker isn't working as hard? EQ pedal to compensate? Cheers. You're not missing out on mid-range frequencies. You're not going to be hearing all the treble and bass. You're going to hear more mids than treble and bass at that low volume. But 18 to 20 dB, just why even turn the damn thing on? Just play acoustically. A deluxe reverb 18 to 20 dB reduction? Are you sure? You sure you mean you're turning that thing down to 18 to 20 dB? That'd be like whispering at you. Yeah, it's not going to sound as good with that much reduction no matter what you do. I'm still waiting to see what Plum Bum meant by wired like a Strat. Will it damage any equipment to route amp A effects out to amp B front input? Thank you very much, Joe. It can. Most effects loops are going to be hopefully low impedance, but closer to line level, like negative 10 dB. Now, it won't really hurt amp Bs to have a hot signal hitting it. It just probably won't sound very good. It is possible to have an effects loop which could damage that if it's a really hot signal, but you're almost never going to run into that in this world, really. Basically, doc, it hurts when I do this, don't do that. If it sounds good, it's fine. If it doesn't sound good, it's not damaged anything. It just doesn't sound very good. So you might love it. It won't hurt it. Hey, Omelet Socks. Here's my videos that new tubes aren't as good as old tubes. What are the difference between a 6v6 today and a 6v6 from 50 years ago? Well, the difference is that some large quantity of 6v6s from 50 years ago that come in are still working, and I would not expect most amps 6v6s made today to still be working in 50 years. They're just not built as ruggedly. They can sound just as good as the old ones. They don't always, but they can sound just as good as the old ones. They're just not likely to last as well. And they are a little more fragile and a little more prone to becoming microphonic. They're just not built to the same standard. And that's not these tubes today with their hair and their clothes. It's just, there's a difference between something that was made by RCA or Philips in the 50s or 60s versus what we're getting out of the plants today, where they're building to as low a price as they can get away with. Let's see. Well, I understand you meant that you're reducing the max volume by 18 dB, but 18 dB is a huge amount of attenuation. I would never want to use more than 12 because 12 typically gets pretty strange on the frequencies. 8 dB is a good amount of attenuation. If you're attenuating something more than 8 dB, you have the wrong amp, especially with the deluxe reverb. Let's see. There's nothing wrong with using your effects loop, and with the DSL amp, you should use the effects loop for adding reverb and delay. Otherwise, you'll be distorting your reverb and distorting your delays in unpleasant ways. But you need to get your levels sorted out. I'm pretty sure at least one of those two pedals in your loop is just set to the wrong input-output level, which could be a sub-menu setting that I don't know off the top of my head. Sorry. There's a lot to the Blue Sky. Oh, don't worry about breaking a new amp to send to just so you can send it to me. I have a suspicion that most of the new amps being made are already broken in some way that people just haven't picked up on yet. But I always seem to find it. Hey, Merlin Q, working on a 1970 Vibrolux reverb. Should be a nice amp. I'm experiencing an accelerating ticking when I turn on the tremolo. It just does it the first time. Any clues? There's a 20 nanofarad cap across the roach. An accelerating ticking when I turn on the tremolo. When you first do it for the first time and you hear tick, 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 like that, and it goes away? Or does it stay constant? I mean, if you're getting ticking, the first thing I would do is with the amp on and the tremolo on, is I get a wooden chopstick or a plastic chopstick or whatever, and move the wires around V5, between the board and V5, especially in a 70, which is going to be the onset of the white spaghetti, and make sure that the wire is going to V5 or not close to any of the wires going to V4 or to V6, and play around with just the positioning of the wires on V5, and then also go in and kind of nudge around the wires that are going from the board to the tremolo speed and intensity pots on the front panel. Beyond that, I would clean that entire area of the board and try to eliminate any DC and see if the problem continues. And also make sure your foot switch jack is very, very tight, and actually I would take it off and I would clean the bit of the chassis that jack contacts, and I clean those parts of the jack, put it together, make it really tight, make sure you don't have a bad ground there. At that point, see if you have any issues. Those are the first steps, and it's so far everything's been free, which is very nice. And also try a different 12AX7 in V5. Sometimes you just got a funky old tube, and that you can chase your tail with everything else, just change out the tube. Let's see, the point where I went blackout. Yeah, man, I love tempura broccoli and tempura cauliflower. Douglas Shaw says he's got the most ignorant question of the day. Well, everyone else is going to be like, hold my Zima. With a master volume amp, is it correct to say the volume control operates on the preamp and the master control operates on the power amp? No, it depends on how the master volume is implemented. If you have a pre-phase inverter master volume, it's affecting the behavior of the phase inverter and everything after it. If you have a post-phase inverter master volume, it's not affecting the phase inverter very much, though it can a little bit because it can affect the negative feedback loop, but it dramatically affects the behavior of the output tubes. So a pre-phase inverter master volume, like you would find, well, here's the best way to put this. If you have a Marshall 2203 style master volume, which is the same kind of master volume you'd find in like a 70s Fender, as you turn it down, the signal being fed into the phase inverter turns down. So if the phase inverter was distorting when you were playing with the master volume up, the phase inverter no longer has that distortion. So the entire sound cleans up as you turn it down, which can be a bad thing for an amp where you want it to have an overdriven sound. And I've shown this before on like the Origin 20, on the Origin 50, and even on some otherwise fantastic top hat amps. When you want to have a dirty sound but turn the master volume down and it cleans up as you turn it down, that's because that's a pre-phase inverter, and the phase inverter no longer overdrives. Whereas you have this Marshall here, this super bass where we added a master volume, I added a post-phase inverter master volume. So as I turn the master volume down, the amp sound does not change that much. It stays distorted until the master volume is below about 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock. So the very minimum part of its travel. You do hear the output section clean up a little bit. But the other thing is, as you turn the master volume down in a post-phase inverter master volume, the presence circuit begins to have less effect because the negative feedback is in the loop and it's being turned down. So sometimes it gets brighter to people's perspective. It's not that the amp's getting brighter, it's the presence is no longer being effective, so it's not attenuating the highs the way a presence circuit can. So, everything works together. It's not an ignorant question at all. So you failed. You failed in your goal. Well, here we go, Alan. See, you told me before that your Fender was not connected to the effects, but that the effects were only in your Marshall. So I don't know how you're set up at all. You cannot have two amps feeding things in their loops like that. So I thought you only had the reverb in the effects loop of your Marshall. You need to either have everything in the effects loop of just the Marshall or everything in front of both amps, but you can't have the same reverb pedal being used in front of the Fender as in the effects loop of your Marshall. I have no experience with a high watt Customer 7, sorry, or Custom 7, whichever it is. Let's see, people talking about Heritage guitars. Everyone seems to agree that they're great guitars with terrible looking headstocks, and I'm sorry about that. It's just one of those things. But if you have one, don't look at it, just play it. They're good guitars. Let's see. And Plum Bum apparently asked a question and then dashed. Everyone's trying to help him out with his SG wiring, and he disappeared. So. Trying to find the next question. Do I really think boutique amps are better made, more reliable than the factory made like Fender? Living UK, most boutique amps are US made, which makes me nervous about backup. No, most of them aren't. There are a lot of people making terrible amps, but they're making them in small quantities and selling them as boutique, and so they are bad. And there are quite good amps being made by factories, and there are quite good amps being made by small companies that maybe or may or not be viewed as boutique. So it's tricky. Like there's even companies called boutique amp distribution, which I don't think are boutique. They're quite large. If you get an amp like a Top Hat or a Swart, that's the true boutique amp. That's a small builder making relatively small qualities very well. And in the UK, look into Rift amps. Chris at Rift Amps does very good work, and he certainly qualifies as true boutique. But there are a lot of guys assembling amp kits poorly, sticking them on eBay saying they're boutique, and so they've really diluted the value of the concept of boutique. Or people saying, hey, I used only the new old stock stuff. I have no idea what I'm doing, but everything in it's expensive, and there's just this snowball con man effect. But there's certainly good stuff being made by factories. It's just that Marshall hasn't made a good amp in a really long time. Fender's never sure which of their amps are good or not, and they get behind the wrong ones and they promote the wrong ones. But the 65 reissue remains a good series, but they put a terrible speaker in it. But if you're in the UK, I would contact Chris at Rift Amp, tell him what your dream amp is, and see if he builds you one. And I bet you'd both be very happy. And Robbie F. said much the same thing. So there you go. Hey, R, got another question about his deluxe reverb. I'd like it to be a lot louder, more clean headroom. What is the most efficient speaker I'd recommend? Is it worth putting in 6L6? How to accomplish? You won't get any benefit putting 6L6s. It'll be a little bit, but not much, because it's still a tiny output transformer. More clean headroom. You can do two things. You can change the 10K dropping resistors to a 1K and 4.7K, or have a tech do it if you don't feel qualified. That'll give you more preamp voltage to give a little more headroom there. Second of all, and the first thing you should do is a more efficient speaker. Now, I don't know which speaker you have. Of the speakers out there, there are some that are crazily efficient, like the pardon me, I swallowed wrong. The Wizard from Eminence is a very, very loud, very efficient speaker, which also tends to be a little bit bright. Some people love it. The ET65 is a very efficient speaker, not as efficient as the Wizard, as is the Creamback 65, both of which may be more efficient than what you have in there now, but I don't know what you have in there now. If you have the Jensen C12K, as I've said before, you've got one of the worst possible choices for that amp, though that's the one that Fender ships with it for some strange reason. So I would, and I don't know if you want the most efficient, because I don't know if you'd like the sound of the 150 watt Wizard, because it's a real hard sound unless it's being pushed by more wattage, but it's very, very efficient. And other guys are going to love the sound of like a Neo Creamback for an efficient lightweight speaker. That would be a better pairing to the output of a deluxe reverb. And you can also play around with the instead of 10K, 10K, 1K, 4.7K. You're going to have a lot more clean headroom in the front. Don't change out 6L6s. That's just asking for trouble without getting any real benefit. But it's also possible that deluxe reverb's not the amp for you. Be open to a twin reverb. If you need a louder, cleaner speaker, that's the traditional way to do it for good reasons. Here's the dumbest question. Where do babies come from? Mistakes. Let's see. We're coming up on the next one. Next intermission. Let's see what I can do before. What would I do with a Fender PA 135 ultralinear? I'd just leave it as is. That's not an amp that I would recommend to people or seek out. Top 5 best headstocks. Well, Gibson's pretty much just, aside from things like the Les Paul Custom, there's pretty much the Gibson headstock. That's certainly up there. Tele and Strat, and by Strat that kind of includes Jazzmaster and Jaguar, and I prefer the pre-67. Those are just so pretty. Certainly not PRS, certainly not GNL or what the. Hold on a second. All right, you guys can hear me. We're gonna do a the intermission now, and I'm gonna let the camera charge for the next 7 minutes. So we're gonna go to the next intermission now, and this will be the last stream where this happens, I promise. All right, hey everyone. This camera's about to die again. I figured out why, but I'm gonna change to the other camera. So just give me a minute. Sorry. Where's my damn micro HDMI adapter? It's around here somewhere. Just a second. Got too many little wire thingies everywhere. Aha. Almost there. Arr. Trying to resume all this. Sorry, man. Almost there. All right. Sorry about all this. One more thing to do. There are questions asked that I've not answered yet. Otherwise, I would just give up on all this. But some days are not my friend. Where did I put the things? Here they are. There's one more button to push, if I can find which one it is. Here, almost there. This one. All right. Now I just got to do the exposure. Oh, come on. Really? Just a second. It's fighting with me. That looks great. Doing all this upside down and backwards. All right, finally. This is at least usable until this battery wears out, because I didn't have time to plug in the dummy battery. I've got that on deck if I need to, though. All right, so this is the other camera. This is the old camera. I figured out what happened. The charger that I had charged the big battery with, I charged this thing with for the other camera. The charger died. Or is having a problem. So I thought it was charging. It wasn't charging. Last week, whole stream, 3+ hours, all off battery, all perfect. So, all right, let's get through some of these here questions. I'm not going to answer best 5 headstocks. That just kills everything, obviously. I don't have any opinion on new vintage orange amps. The old ones are probably better, but I think they're all kind of ugly. I'm not a huge fan of orange amps, but I know that I'm in the minority there. Let's see. Pastor, I need your questions to be questions. I say that kindly, but half your questions aren't questions. But they take so much reading and there's so much math with them. It's hard to keep up with what you're actually saying. Let's see. Well, you're back in my good graces, Pastor, because you quoted Mojo Nixon. How are 70s Pro Reverbs? Would it be worth repairing one? They're great. Absolutely. Now, some of the late 70s are ultra linear and people don't understand how that works, but they're quite good. Let's see. By the way, if you're wondering what the difference between the old camera and the new camera is, here it is. I look a lot better on the new camera when the new camera is turning on. It's the same lens. Camera's in the same place. And it's getting a little bit bright behind us, but I'm not going to mess with that right now. Given a small 1-watt Fender Blackface style amp with a larger output transformer sound better or louder than a smaller output? It's almost not going to matter with a 1-watt amp. I don't pay attention to the world of 1-watt amps, but as long as it's a 1-watt output transformer, you're fine. Anything beyond that won't be stressed at all. Pardon me. Trying to get to the next question. People are probably going to be really busy making fun of my blacked out stream or watching a close-up of my gut as I dialed in the camera settings. It's not easy working behind the camera because normally if I want to, you would just make changes on the back of the camera. You'd see the screen, but I'm working when it was up here on back, guessing where things had to be. Let's see. And I am without coffee because I spent all that time doing this stuff. I'm not a big fan of the Novo headstock, or Fano, but hey, they work. All right. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. Hope you're feeling good these days. I know you went through an awful lot. Hopefully that's all in your rear view. Man, things like that just really take the wind out of my sails. I think we're going to close up shop a little bit early today. But let me get through any last questions. Toombs Clawtooth. I don't know why I wanted to make you a Toombs McClawtooth. But hey, Toombs, thanks. This is a SE Electronics SE 4100. Sounds better, at least on my voice, than a 414. 414s tend to be a little bit crisp. I am not going to do a video on repairing a battery charger. No, I'm going to. Might do a video of me taking it out in the driveway and hitting it with a hammer. There are no pros to the Vox AC10. The Vox AC10 is a terrible amplifier. The 15 is phenomenal. The 30 is fantastic. The 10's bad. I've got videos on the AC10 custom series. It is built to catch on fire. It is too small to accept a good speaker and has no headroom because of how they did the terrible unipolar 5-volt supply effects loop and buffering. You know, all the stuff for the reverb and the tremolo and the effects loop. Well, all that stuff is just takes all your signal and squashes it down to nothing, and then makes it big again. By the time it's big again, it's just a big version of crap. So it takes a good signal, squashes it down, gets all this bad sound, then makes a large, loud version of that squashed down bad sound. It's electronics 101 that they failed. So, sorry to be honest. It's a hazard of the job. Hey, Telman 1800. Yeah, I like tube amp kits, and Tube Depot's got some good ones, but I think the Mojo Tone ones are the best ones on the market right now. All right, yeah. Man, I used to work at Cat's Music here in Midtown. Later, I was a assistant manager at Blockbuster Music, but back at the time of question, I was working at Cat's Music over on Union, and Mojo Nixon came in. And our store knew Mojo Nixon. We didn't need no fixing. And I asked him if he was looking for anything particular. He was looking to see if we had any old Lightning Hopkins records and stuff like that. And I said, we've got a whole section on that. Help yourself. If you want to listen to anything, I'll put it on the CD player for you. And he was wondering where to go to get this or that or the other. And he was going to call a taxi. I said, I get off in 10 minutes. I'll take you anywhere you want to go. So I drove Mojo Nixon around for a day. I had the honor. He was both crazier and less crazy in real life than his TV persona, but he loved real music, and he was seeking out the real music and the real food and what life here was really like, as opposed to the cartoon version of it. What is my opinion on the Marshall DSL 20CR circuit? Why they sound very fizzy? Because they're using two EL34s when they could use two EL84s. It doesn't have enough voltage to make to justify EL34s. It's a marketing amp. It's not a very good sounding amp. The DSL 40 CR is a good amp. This DSL 20 CR is not good at all. I'm sorry that they did that to everyone. I would say sell it while it works and figure out a better one. There's a lot of better amps on the market. Hey, Josh Roberts, glad it helped. Bassman 100s are inexpensive, Dan D, because they're kind of bland. They're good amps. They're just kind of bland amps. They don't have a lot of character. They are a good amp to be a pedal platform, as RJ Electric there is asking. Most people want a amp that has almost no character for a pedal platform, though that's not my preference. I like to add pedals to an amp that already has character. And I'd say that any classic Fender, deluxe reverb, super reverb, twin reverb, whatever, or AC30 or a JTM 45 are traditionally very good sounding pedal platforms, or at least were used that way for a long time before people wanted the amp to be neutral and just all the tone to come from your Morningstar or whatever. An awful lot of people made an awful lot of great records using a deluxe reverb or a twin or a AC30 with a bunch of pedals in front of it. Hey, 10,000 hour project. Multiply yourself by about 10 or 100 and you'll get there. Let me give you the same link I give a lot of people here. Go here for advice on how to learn how to build amps. Read that, know that stuff. Build a whole bunch of pedals so that all your mistakes are happening at 9 volts, so you don't electrocute yourself. The current is very low, so nothing catches on fire, and all the components are cheap. So when you do make the inevitable mistakes, you're out $20, not $400 or more. This has been a strange stream. Had some battery issues, as those of you who here know about it. My brand new, shiny, fantastic camera was less than shiny and fantastic when it was dark. I'm going to sort all that out so this doesn't ever happen to us again. And this camera, which was good for many, many years as my main camera, sure is not very good in comparison, but it does turn on, which is the other one is not turning on at the moment. But it is a fantastic photography camera. So for those of you who like to see what I've been doing with this camera as I walk around my neighborhood, go to Flickr, and I'm on there as Lyle Caldwell. So I'm going to put that, I'm not going to put a link, I'm just going to say flickr.com and then Lyle Caldwell. So if any of you guys want to check out what I've been up to on there, it's there, it's free. I'm not making any money on it. I'm not a professional photographer. In theory, I'm a professional videographer these days, but look what I did. So, I look like I should be better at this, right? But the stuff that charges all this apparently needs to be working on itself. So I think all this technology was undone by a $39 charger. I'll sort it out. Thanks, guys. Have a good week. See you next time. As he remembers which button to push.